Hey, welcome back. Last time, we briefly went over Animate CC and its basic layout. Today we'll continue on and explain the different tools in Animate CC and Flash. To the left, you'll see all the tools available to use. By the way, if you hear a tool you don't recognize, for some reason CC 2020 has hidden them away, but you can get them back by clicking these three dots and then dragging them wherever you want. You can even combine them like so. For now, just follow the layout we did. Press V and you'll have your basic selection tool. You can click and drag images around with this tool. If you haven't noticed it yet, there are little arrows under most of the tools in the toolbar. If you hold your left click down on a tool that has that, it'll show you another one. They are similar tools packaged together. Press A and you get the subselection tool, which is used to mess around with vectors and shapes that you've created. When you use it to select a vector, it'll bring up a number of nodes to manipulate depending on which shape you create, and you can move them around however you wish. We don't recommend using this with sprites, since it'll create a ton of nodes and you probably won't get much use out of it. Next, if you press Q, you'll get the free transform tool. It's one of the most important tools in Flash since it allows you to rotate, skew, resize, shrink, and enlarge images. If you hold keys like Shift, Control, or Alt, you can rotate and move things in a variety of different ways. Try them out for yourself. You can also right-click on something that you've selected to get more options. We'll go more in depth in the later chapter in a dedicated video. Moving on though, the next tool is the lasso tool, which you can get by pressing L. It allows you to freely take a portion of a trace sprite or a vector by circling around it. By pressing L again, you can get the polygon tool, which is similar to the lasso tool, but allows for more cleaner cuts. Use it by drawing out points that you want to cut with the tool selected, and then double-click after you've selected what you want to manipulate. Next are the 3D rotation tool and the 3D translation tool. By pressing Shift W, you can get the 3D rotation tool, which turns your sprite into a sort of 3D plane, where each colored line will rotate on a certain plane. Press G and you'll get the 3D translation tool, which moves in a 3D space, which is pretty useful if you're starting to use the anime camera. The thing is, it's sort of finicky and we won't be using it too much in these tutorials moving forward, so you can check out other resources on that if you want to. There's the Asset Warp tool by pressing W. It lets you take a piece of a trace bitmap or vector and move it around however you want, though you may get better results by separating pieces in another program. Then if you press Y, you'll get the Paintbrush tool, which is another drawing tool. There are options for stroke thickness, style, and smoothing. There are size and pressure settings as well. Shift Y gives you the Pencil tool. It's similar to the Brush tool. You can draw with it and make vectors. Pressing R lets you make rectangles. Click and drag to change its size. Pressing O lets you make ovals. It's like the rectangle tool. Holding Shift will keep it as a circle, the Polystar tool, which lets you make octagons or stars. Go to Tool Settings and Options to choose how many sides or points you want a star or octagon to have. If you press N, you'll get the Line tool. You can create outlines for a shape or an alignment line to animate on so your sprites are fully aligned with the map. If you hold Shift, you can create a straight line. If you hover over a line with the mouse tool around the middle, you should see the icon for the mouse change. Drag that around and you can get a curve. Pressing T lets you make text. You can make a box and type text into it. You can change certain parameters like color, size, and font. You can break it apart and turn it into a vector as well. The Bone tool lets you create armatures and turn vectors into puppets. This doesn't really get used for sprite animation much, so we can't say a lot about it. E gives you the Eraser tool. This one's also pretty straightforward. You simply hold your left click and drag your mouse all over the place that you want to erase, and then release your hold when you're done. It's not really all that good for sprites though, as the default erasers aren't good for pixels. Pressing K gives you the Paint Bucket tool. If you have a closed vector shape with nothing inside of it, select a color and click inside the hollow shape, and you'll fill it with the selected color. If you press S, you'll get the Ink Bottle tool. It'll make a solid outline with the stroke thickness of your choice by simply left-clicking on a shape with no outline. Pressing I will give you the Eyedropper tool. It does exactly what it says and gives you the color that you left-click on with the tool selected, useful for replacing colors in a pinch. By pressing U, you get the Width tool. It gives you control over the width of an outline of a shape. Not exactly something that you want to use that often, but still useful to an extent. If you're using Animate CC instead of Flash 8, you'll see the camera icon next. This turns on the built-in Animate CC camera, which is controlled by your mouse, unlike the VCam most people use that allows you to control it with the arrow keys. The benefit of using the Animate camera is that you can preview your work a lot easier without exporting the animation by clipping the stage. Then there's the Hand tool by pressing H. You can drag the stage around to readjust yourself. You can also do this by holding down space and also holding down left-clicking while dragging your mouse around. You could also use the middle mouse button to accomplish the same thing. If you press Shift H, you'll get the Rotation tool, which allows you to rotate the entire canvas. To reset a rotation, be sure to click this icon at the top right of the stage right here. Alt Shift and H will bring up another hand tool that lets you scrub through the timeline without actually touching it. If you hold left click, then move either right or left, you can move along the timeline, useful for moving through longer animations. Finally, press Z for the zoom tool, which allows you to zoom in or out of the canvas. Alternatively, you could hold down Control and scroll up or down to zoom in and out. The magnet tool is for snapping, but we'll go over this in a later tutorial, but just something to keep in mind for now. Below this is color, which you know. You can click and choose whatever you want. You can use a hex code here if you want to remember a specific color. You can also change the opacity by messing around with some alpha channel here. 100 is fully opaque, and 0 is just transparent. The Colors panel, if you click on this icon, or go to Windows, Colors, gives you more options on what to do with the colors. If you click a colored vector, for example, let's just make a rectangle here, click it, and then open the color window. We can see a similar setup to what we have with the color wheel. You can mess around with the colors and opacity by dragging around the circle or values on the right. We primarily focus on color with the bucket tool, which counts as a fill. Solid color is the full color, but if you click it, you can see some gradient options. When you click the linear gradient option, you should see a black and white gradient by default. You can also edit the colors by clicking the picks and changing the color above. Drag them around to change where it starts to gradient. Click somewhere in between to add a new gradient color. You can drag a pick down to get rid of it. You can also change the opacity for one of these colors by dragging down the value that says A for alpha. Similar thing for radial gradient, except, it's a radial instead of linear. By pressing F, you get the gradient free transform tool. This does exactly what you think. You can create a gradient in Flash and then manipulate its starting points or the direction it's going with the gradient free transform tool. There's also the scene tabs that allows for new sets of timelines, so when you eventually get to export the animation, it'll export it in one after the other. In this tutorial, we don't need to worry about it. Okay, so the stuff above, like File, Modify, and the others, are something we'll go over later, as most of these are built-in panels and tools we'll need to work with later, or are shortcuts that you'll memorize. Just remember, files are pretty much the same as other programs, shortcuts and all. Remember to save too! And that's all the tools in Animate. Some are essential to sprite animating, and others not so much. We'll be going over the more important ones in greater detail as we learn more about Flash and Animate. Until then,